200,000 flowers, harvested by hand, for just 1 kilogram. Wars were fought over it. People were executed for faking it. In medieval Nuremberg, counterfeiters were buried alive in sacks of the very spice they forged. Without humans, this plant literally cannot survive. This is the story of saffron, the most expensive spice in the world, and one of the strangest substances in human history. In a silent room beneath layers of volcanic ash, the walls of Akrotiri still breathe with color. Here, on the island of Santorini, a fresco painted around 1600 BCE shows a young figure reaching into a field of vivid crocus blossoms, plucking the 3 red stigmas that would, thousands of years later, be called saffron. The detail is uncanny. The artist captured not just the violet petals, but the precise way the stigmas dangle, fragile and bright, from the center of each bloom. Botanists and archaeologists agree. This is no generic flower. It is Crocus sativus, the sterile, impossible crocus that never grows wild, that never sets seed. The Akrotiri fresco is the oldest known image of saffron harvesting, a record older than any surviving text. The pigments, analyzed by the National Archaeological Museum of Athens, reveal iron oxide reds layered with organic traces, a chemistry that echoes the living spice itself. In the painting, baskets overflow with the gathered stigmas, and the act of harvest is ritualized, almost sacred. This is not mere decoration, it is a record of labor, value, and perhaps belief. Curators at the museum point to the anatomical precision in the crocus forms, the way each stigma is singled out for its color and delicacy. Even now, the scene draws questions that are as much scientific as historical. How did a plant that cannot survive without human hands become the centerpiece of Minoan life? The answer lies not in myth or legend, but in the biology of a flower that, from the very beginning, demanded total human devotion. Saffron's survival is a scientific riddle. Crocus sativus, the source of every red stigma, is a botanical dead end, a sterile autotriploid with 3 mismatched sets of chromosomes that refuse to cooperate. Under the microscope, its pollen is malformed, its ovules abortive. The plant cannot set seed. Not a single wild population has ever been found. For over 3,500 years, the only way saffron has continued is through human hands. Each year, farmers dig up the corms, split them apart, and replant the clones. Every living saffron flower is a genetic copy of that first accidental hybrid. In 2019, a team led by a geneticist at TU Dresden set out to trace its origin. They sequenced hundreds of saffron samples from across Eurasia, comparing them to wild crocus relatives. The answer was hidden in the DNA. Nearly all saffron's genetic markers matched Crocus cartwrightianus, a humble wildflower from the Attica region near Athens. The evidence pointed to a single event, somewhere in ancient Attica, when 2 wild crocuses merged their chromosomes, creating a sterile triploid that could never reproduce on its own. From that moment, every saffron plant would depend on human intervention for its survival. This fragile dependence is not just a curiosity. It is the root of saffron's scarcity, and the reason it became so valuable, so jealously guarded, and so often the cause of violence. Without ceaseless human care, the world's most expensive spice would vanish in a single generation. In the palaces of ancient Persia, saffron was never just a seasoning. It perfumed the baths of kings, coloring the water a luminous gold and filling the air with a scent that was, to foreign envoys, almost hallucinatory. Royal archives from Persepolis list saffron among the tribute demanded from distant provinces, its weight measured like precious metal, its presence a sign of imperial reach. In these courts, saffron was dissolved in wine, pressed into salves, and woven into the very fabric of royal garments. The Greek physician Dioscorides, writing in the 1st century CE, described saffron as medicine for the heart and the mind, an elixir reserved for those who could afford to treat melancholy with gold. When Alexander of Macedon swept through Persia, he did more than conquer cities. He adopted the saffron bath ritual, ordering his generals to soak their wounds in water-stained red gold, convinced it would speed their recovery and win the gods' favor. Plutarch records that Alexander's tent, after the fall of Babylon, was thick with the aroma of saffron, a deliberate echo of the Persian kings he had displaced. The practice spread with his armies, seeping into the daily life of the Hellenistic world, perfumed linens, saffroned oils, and the slow transformation of a Greek medicinal herb into the ultimate symbol of luxury and conquest. Classical writers, from Galen to Pliny, catalogued saffron's virtues in treatises that blurred the line between pharmacology and status. The more it was praised in learned texts, the more its price climbed. Saffron's journey from the volcanic fields of the Aegean to the marble baths of Persepolis and the war tents of Alexander was not just a story of trade, but of ritual, spectacle, and elite obsession, a fragile red thread binding the fates of empires. In the back alleys of medieval Europe, saffron was more than a luxury, it was a reason to kill. The records of Nuremberg's city council, preserved by a meticulous archivist in the Stadtarchiv, tell of a justice system obsessed with purity. In 1444, the merchant Jobst Findeker was sentenced to be buried alive in a sack of forged saffron. His crime, blending beetroot and iron filings with the real threads, cheated the city's guilds and its faith in the red gold. The punishment was public, the message unmissable. In Nuremberg, the spice was sacred, and the law responded with ritual violence. But the blood price of saffron was not only paid in German courts. In the Swiss town of Ballstal, the summer of 1374 brought a different kind of reckoning. 14 weeks of armed standoff erupted over a hijacked saffron convoy, a caravan of 150 carts ambushed on a mountain pass. The local chronicles, pored over by a Swiss medievalist, count more than 300 dead before the surviving merchants surrendered their cargo. Even centuries later, a basalt relief in the parish church still shows a saffron-colored banner above crossed swords, a silent witness to the carnage. Meanwhile, in England, the legend of Saffron Walden lingers in the town's name. Folklore claims a pilgrim smuggled forbidden corms inside his staff, risking execution to plant the first English crocus. Municipal records list saffron gardens and tax levies, but the story of the smuggler, part fact, part myth, shows just how far people would go for a plant that could not live without them. In every case, the violence grew from scarcity. The spice was fragile, the supply always on the edge of vanishing, and the human cost was measured in blood as much as in gold. Venice, for centuries a city built on water and risk, built its fortune by taming chaos into order. By the late 1400s, saffron shipments from the Levant and Spain flowed through its docks, but nothing entered the city unchecked. Behind the arched windows of the Arte dei Speziali, the Apothecaries Guild, saffron's value was measured, graded, and enforced by statute. Price lists preserved in the guild's ledgers show the spice divided into ranks: oro for the deepest red threads, argento for the merely bright. Every merchant's sack bore a seal, every sale a record. The guild's statutes, still legible in the parchment registers of the Archivio di Stato di Venezia, set penalties for fraud, fines, exclusion, even public denunciation. A Venetian economic historian paging through these records finds not only prices but patterns, seasonal spikes, sudden shortages, and the quiet endurance of La Mancha's saffron fields in Spain. While other regions saw their crops vanish after wars or blight, La Mancha's growers kept the harvest alive year after year, their corms divided and replanted along the same dusty routes mapped in Renaissance shipping manifests. Venice's control was never absolute, but its system left an imprint. Saffron, once a cause for violence, became a commodity regulated by law, by price, and by the cold arithmetic of the guild. The red threads that once drew blood in the Alps now passed through counting rooms and customs ledgers, their scarcity managed by statute instead of sword. In the fields of eastern Iran, the autumn air hangs heavy with dust and anticipation. Here, in the Khorasan province, nearly 90% of the world's saffron is pulled from the earth by hand. The numbers are staggering. More than 200,000 flowers must be picked and stripped for a single kilogram of dried threads. A farmer bends over the rows, his hands stained orange, repeating a ritual older than the Persian Empire. He digs, splits the corm, replants, harvests, and repeats. The crop's survival depends on this cycle. Without it, saffron would vanish in a single season. Yet the world's appetite for red gold has never been higher. As demand soars, so does deception. In a laboratory across the continent, a scientist receives a shipment labeled pure saffron. Under the microscope, the truth is less romantic. Petals of safflower, strands of dyed corn silk, even shreds of red-tinted cardboard. The European Union's ISO 3632 standard, designed to grade saffron by its crocin, picrocrocin, and safranal content, is supposed to protect buyers. But enforcement is patchy and the black market thrives. One test tube holds genuine Khorasan threads, another a mixture that stains water but offers none of the aroma or bitterness that define the real thing. The paradox that began in ancient fields persists. A sterile plant, kept alive only by human effort, now fuels a global trade riddled with fraud and suspicion. And yet, the same science that unmasks forgeries has begun to reveal something else. Clinical trials show that crocin and safranal, compounds unique to true saffron, may ease depression and slow the progression of Alzheimer's disease. The plant that once inspired violence now draws the attention of doctors and researchers who see in its chemistry a new kind of hope. The story of saffron, it seems, is not finished. Its future, like its past, is tangled in the hands of those willing to protect, counterfeit, or unlock its secrets. Even now, every crocus bloom depends on human hands, 3 fragile stigmas bought and bled for. As counterfeit trade surges and climate shifts threaten the harvest, saffron's survival is a mirror. Our obsessions shape nature, and sometimes nature shapes what we're willing to become. What would you pay?